It's 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program, Moms. Brenner also live on YouTube, by the way. Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein joins us. He's a very frequent guest on our program. Always has some very interesting content. He's a prolific writer. He's an educator, and he's actually leading a tour to Spain and other areas. And he is based out of the Five Towns. His Torah center is called Mechon Magid Harakia. Rabbi Glatstein, welcome back to the program. Shavua Tov.
Hi, Shavua Tov, Zev. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good to have you back again. I'll
Thank
tell you why I invited you on this program is my mechutant, Rudy Lowy, said, you got to listen to the tape of Rabbi Glatstein. He's talking about the end of days and about one of the sages has a interesting observation how America is going to fare, how American Jews are going to fare compared to other countries outside of Israel. American Jews are going to be singled out for something very, very special at the end of the day. So it can take even the money with them when they go to Israel. So we're going to get to that. So that's why I invited you on. So tell us, because you're, of course, dealing with a period of time in his history, dealing where this prediction and prophecy was made. So let's start at the beginning.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. And regards to your mechutin, I'm glad he's still listening to the Shiurim. So actually, this week's show, we spoke about a figure of great historic interest. And today, not many still know about him. But those who study history, he's a very important figure in our history. His name was Rabbeinu Menashe ben Yisrael, or academically, Menashe ben Israel. And he was born in Portugal, and probably in Lisbon. And his father just barely escaped the auto da fe. He escaped the Inquisition. And they come to Amsterdam. Amsterdam was a more open community. They were more accepting and tolerant of Jews. And the family, for the first time, announces and declares their observance of Judaism publicly. And that's when he received his Jewish name, Menashe. I mean, in Portugal, he was known as Manuel Dias Soeira. So he couldn't, the family hid their observance. They were what we call crypto Jews, conversos. We don't like to use the word Marano. Marano is a pejorative term. It means pig. But they come to Amsterdam, and in Portugal, Menashe ben Israel was very educated in many disciplines. He was an expert he spoke 10 languages, but he never had a Jewish education in Portugal. He comes to Amsterdam, and he quickly makes great strides in his studies of Judaic subjects. And after studying from his rabbi, upon his rabbi's passing, he becomes sort of like the chief Torah educator for the youth. He studied by Rabbi Yitzchak Uziel, but there was a certain hierarchy of rabbis in Amsterdam. In the time, there was Rav Shaul Martera, many know him as the Binyan Ariel. There were other rabbanim, Rabbi Yitzchak Abuhab, and then there was Menashe ben Israel. And
Wasn't he considered a world Jewish traveler?
Well, he was a traveler only because he started off in Portugal. He comes to Amsterdam, and actually he was going to go to Brazil to take a job in Brazil, but then Rabbi Yitzchak Abuhab got the job over him, so he stayed in Portugal, and he opened up a printing press. So all the books published in Holland were under his auspices. And this is an interesting thing, just as a student of history, that, you know, at the time he wasn't necessarily the top-ranking rabbi, but because he published more than others, so later on in history, he's much more recognized, and his name is carries more weight today because of the name recognition of many of the Svarim he wrote. He wrote about 25 different Svarim. He wrote in Latin, he wrote in Spanish, he wrote in Hebrew, he wrote in English. And I guess what the element of his, and he had interesting friends. He was friendly with Rembrandt, so there's certain sketches of Menashe ben Israel which were sketched by Rembrandt. Menashe ben Israel wrote a book.
How much are those sketches worth today?
I don't know. I think there is some controversy exactly which ones are Rembrandt. There was like a Jewish Rembrandt. Some of the sketches are from a Jew who purported to be Rembrandt-esque. If you want to see the most authentic picture of Menashe ben Israel, Here it is.
Those are watching us on YouTube, okay?
Yeah, so if you're watching, here it is. There are a few others that are probably not him, but they look like him. He wrote a book in Latin called, or in Spanish, the Conciliator, where he tried to reconcile various contradictions of passages in the Tanakh. He also wrote a book in Spanish, Piedra Gloriosa o de la Estatua de Nebuchadnezzar, which was the meaning of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar. And in this book, Rembrandt made an etching of Rabbi Menashe. So probably the most well-known book he wrote is known as Mikveh Yisrael. That's what he wrote in Hebrew. But originally, he did not write it in Hebrew. It was written in Latin. It was written in Spanish. In Spanish, it was known as Esperanza de Israel. And it was based on a very unusual story where he met somebody by the name of Aaron Halevi. Aaron Halevi was known as Antonio de Montezinos, who was a Portuguese traveler, a Marano Sephardic Jew, who convinced Menashe ben Israel that he found one of the 10 lost tribes. Okay. And where were they living? They were living in the jungles in the Quito province. That's in Ecuador. And again, you have to understand, Menashe ben Israel is coming from, he's running one away from the Inquisition, the auto de fe. So that automatically puts into your DNA certain messianic fervor and messianic aspiration and yearning.
What year are we talking about?
Okay, so Menashe ben Israel was born in 1604.
And just for everyone, the Inquisition lasted for hundreds of years.
Correct.
And people
even into the 20th century.
When did the Inquisition officially end?
You know, sometime last week. No, but in recent in recent history, I can't give you the date, but in recent history. In fact, there are crypto Jews in this country that are still afraid to come out into the open because of the centuries of fear that is seared into their consciousness. In states in the West, in Puerto Rico, in South America. Okay, so it was the belief of Menashe ben Israel that in order for the Messiah to come, in order for Mashiach to come, Jews need to be exiled to all four corners of the world. And until that happens, the Mashiach will not come. So he believed that the Jews of America, actually, most specifically, he believed the native inhabitants of America were descendants of the lost 10 tribes. In other words, the Native American Indians, he believed were from the Aser Hashvatim. Does anyone else substantiate this? Does anyone else agree with this? Unclear. But this was the belief of Menashe ben Israel based on a meeting with this traveler. And he believed that the Jews coming to America was the fulfillment of basically what we have in this week's Parsha. And it's of note that you're bringing me on. This is the week of Parsha Shlach. What's very interesting is, God in this week's Parsha, he says, Chai anin Hashem va'amale es kol ha'olam. Hashem says, V'imole chavodi es kol ha'olam. My honor will fill the whole world. That's like an oath that God takes in this week's Parsha, that his glory will fill the whole world. In Tehillim, we find that what was the oath that God took? Vayisa yada lahem lazarasa ma'aratzos. God took an oath, he'll scatter us throughout the world. So it's somewhat of a contradiction. In Tehillim, God swears because of the sin of the spies, he'll scatter us all over the world. And in the Parsha, God says he swears his glory will fill the world. So the Netziv understands, and others as well, that the motivation of scattering the Jewish people all over the world, as we find in Tehillim, is what we find in this week's Parsha, for God's glory to fill the whole world. If we would have been on a great enough level, then the glory of God would have filled the world by us being in the land of Israel. But because we succumbed to the sin of the spies, so now for God's glory to fill the world, we have to physically be all over the world. So Menashe ben Israel believed that when the Jews are exiled, even to the ends of the world, which he understood meant America, that is the precursor to the coming of the Mashiach. So he wrote this book, Mikveh Yisrael, and it occupied the attention and the interest of the Christian world at the time. We know the Jews were kicked out of England in 1290, and they were not allowed back for many, many, many centuries. People say Shakespeare was an anti-Semite. In all likelihood, he never saw a Jew. There were no Jews in England. The Jews were thrown out since the year 1290. But now, Menashe ben Israel's work is translated into English, and everyone's buzzing about if the Jews are in America, then the Mashiach will come. There's just one problem. There's still one country where the Jews are not allowed entrance. They're not allowed entrance into England. So from Menashe ben Israel and the Jews' point of view, Mashiach can't come until the Jews are allowed entrance into England. As far as the Christians are concerned, there can't be a second coming until the Jews see the second coming. And they're not going to see the second coming if they're not in England. So it was to the advantage of the Jews to be allowed back in England, and it was to the advantage of the Christians to allow the Jews back into England. So
which denomination of Christians? Was it the Catholic Church? Was it the Protestants?
The Protestants, yeah, Protestant. So Menashe ben Israel traveled to England, and he made a formal petition from Oliver Cromwell to allow the Jews back into England. In fact, let me show you. Menashe ben Israel wrote this work. It's called To His Highness the Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland, the humble address to Oliver Cromwell. And when Menashe ben Israel comes to Oliver Cromwell, legend has it that he starts explaining that the Jews do not hate the Christians and that we have friendship and brotherhood, and there's no reason for the Christians to hate us. And Oliver Cromwell, listens to this whole speech, and he says, "What are you telling me? You're preaching to the choir. I know that. I know you don't hate us. And but I have one simple question for you." This is a very powerful question. Cromwell asks Menashe ben Israel, why would you want to come back to England? We threw you out. Why do you want to come back here? This is not your land. You belong in Israel. Why? What are you coming back here for?
Very good question.
Good question. York. You're coming back to York, where they burnt you alive. Why would you come back? It's like we have this. Jews have a need to go back to the countries where they tortured us. We go on vacation. Where are you going on vacation? I'm going to Auschwitz. Some reason we like to go back to these places. That was the question Cromwell asks Menashe ben Israel, and Menashe ben Israel. Interestingly, he was a great Kabbalist. You would have thought that he would have been a rationalist.
Why?
Because of his sophisticated level of education. Usually, you would have expected him to be more of a rationalist. And the other rabbis in Amsterdam at the time, Reb Shalom Martera, was more of a rationalist. But Menashe ben Israel was a very big believer in the legitimacy of the Zohar HaKadosh. And he says that the Zohar asks, what's the difference between the redemption from Egypt and the redemption and the future redemption? He says the redemption from Egypt was localized to Egypt. The future redemption will be all over the world. Point being, Menashe ben Israel said that not all the nations of the world believed in the Exodus. So God therefore scatters us all over the world, so that when he will redeem us in the future, all the nations of the world will concede to the original Exodus. So Oliver Cromwell supposedly was very impressed that the Jewish people, he thought that Cromwell said, I thought you were down and out. I thought you had no national aspiration. I thought you had low morale. And I see that after thousands of years, your morale and your aspiration is as strong as ever. And he was very impressed with that. And supposedly, even though historically, Menashe ben Israel's petition did not make a difference, and Cromwell did not allow the Jews back. But it's assumed that unofficially Jews began to return to England, and they were not allowed official readmittance for another 100 years.
And England, of course, even to this day, there's a hotbed of anti-Semitism in England. We had on a professor who wrote a very thick book documenting all the anti-Semitism in England.
Yeah, It's in the soil. It's in the air, right? Regarding what you began with, where the Jews.
We're going to pick up on that point. Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein is our guest. He's a prolific writer. He is a scholar. He's head of the Machon Maggid Haraki as a congregation up in the Five Towns, and he's also leading a tour to Spain. Correct?
Yes. So we're going July 10th to the 17th. We're going to Spain. We're going to for Shabbos to Amsterdam and then to Portugal. And we're retracing the footsteps of the Jewish people from the times of the Rishonim until throughout the centuries, when exiled from Spain and Portugal, they made their way to Amsterdam.
Tell everyone, and we'll give it again, and then when we conclude the interview, how can people get information about the trip? And I think you're offering $200 off anybody who comes on the trip from this program. Oh,
yes. So thank you. You could find out about the trip. The trip is being organized by Aver Tours, Aveer Tours. You could go to our site, rabbidg.com, where you could see information. You could see the itinerary. And as you mentioned, anyone who mentions that they heard about it on your program will receive $200 off per person. And, people ask me, because usually our tours are, we visit a lot of kvarim, a lot of graves of the early authorities. Actually, there are no graves in Spain. They did a very good job of destroying all the cemeteries and all the graves of the righteous. But they've recently discovered the general area where the Rif, Rabbi Yitzchak Elfasi, is buried, as well as the Rimagash. And in Amsterdam, we have the grave of Menashe ben Israel. So he has a rather interesting prediction.
And we're going to get to that when we come back after the following messages.
Okay.
If you'd like to chime in our conversation, where our numbers are 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. You want to email. Email is a wonderful way to get your questions answered. zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. Coming up a little later on, we'll hear from the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, coming up on our special broadcast. We're going to be right back.
One overdose can take a life, but one spray of naloxone, one friend who is there, one person who knows help is available, could save it. Fentanyl is making the drug supply more dangerous, and more New Yorkers are dying of overdose than ever before. What you know can save a life. Help keep your community safe by learning about overdose risk and supporting access to life-saving services. Visit nyc.gov/alcohol and drugs to learn more.
Income eligibility limits for the Medicare Savings Program have increased. If you make $2,260 a month or less, you may qualify for our Medicare Savings Program to help pay for your premiums, deductibles, co-insurance, and co-payments. Connect with a Get Covered NYC specialist to see if you qualify for a Medicare Savings Program. Call 311 and ask for Get Covered NYC or visit nyc.gov/getcoverednyc.
The tobacco companies don't want you to hear this ad. Nope, they don't want you to know that every New Yorker can get free help from an amazing quit coach to help you start quitting and cheer you on. And they definitely don't want you to know that you can get free and safe nicotine medications like patches and lozenges that can help you reduce your urge to smoke. They don't want you to know because medications and a quit coach can double your chance of success. Call 1-866-NY-QUIT or visit nysmokefree.com today. Go ahead, you can do it.
At the end of a long day, I unwind in my den with my favorite book and an amazing view out my Anderson windows. Reading as the sun sets helps me relax as I get lost in my imagination. I'm a self-expressionist. See more at andersonselfexpressionist.com. Love the life you see.
Available at Greater Windows and Doors at 1302 60th Street in Borough Park. Call them at 718-972-2626. Greater Windows has been serving the community for over 30 years. Commercial and residential accounts welcome. Online at greaterwindows.com.
Did you know that New York City families speak over 180 languages? Good news for parents. All public schools in the city provide translation services and interpreters for meetings. You can request translation for report cards, special education documents like IEPs, and interpretation for your meetings with teachers and staff. For more information, visit schools.nyc.gov/hello or call 311.
This is Idanis Rodriguez, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation. Mayor Eric Adams and I want to remind you that things happen fast on the street. When you're driving, your speed can feel slow, but if you hit someone, it's terrifyingly fast. Drivers, watch out for pedestrians and cyclists and slow your turns to less than 5 miles per hour. Remember, speeding ruins lives. Slow down.
If you're on Medicaid, the Essential Plan, or Child Health Plus, these programs will no longer renew automatically. Here's how to stay covered. Start by updating your contact information on your health insurance account. Then look for your renewal notice and respond by your renewal deadline. For expert help with renewing your health insurance or more information, visit nyc.gov/health/health coverage.
Eating mostly plant foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans is good for your health. I use beans instead of meat in my grandmother's jerk-style recipe. And when I'm at work, I get a tofu vegetable stir-fry.
I like to get a whole wheat veggie hummus wrap for lunch.
Fresh, frozen, canned, or dried, eat a whole lot more plant foods when you can. For free recipes, resources, and food assistance, call 311 or visit nyc.gov/nutrition.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein is our guest. He's a prolific writer. Has a congregation in Five Towns area in New York. He's also a scholar, historian, and we're looking at some interesting stories about Menashe ben Israel. And before we get back to our teaser, let's see if we take a phone call. Let's go to George in Manhattan. You have a question for Rabbi Glatstein. Go ahead, George in Manhattan.
Yes, hello. It's a very interesting topic. I have a question. Earlier in the conversation, your guest mentioned that the term Moreno is a derogatory term. Will you explain that? I'll hang up and listen. Why is it derogatory?
Good question. Thank you.
Okay, because in Spanish, the word means pig. So the Inquisition, the auto de fe, was more than weeding out Jews, were weeding out Jews who supposedly converted to Christianity and were observing Judaism in secret. So they labeled these Jews pigs. So it was an epithet, it was an insult. So similar to the word to Orthodox, the word Orthodox is not the name that we call ourselves. We don't refer to ourselves as Orthodox is an epithet. Orthodox means rigid. That's what the other denominations call us. We don't refer to for Torah observant Jews. There's just observant Jews. Morano is similar to the term Orthodox. Orthodox is not a complimentary term.
We call ourselves Orthodox Jews.
Yeah, because we like to use the insult that they heap on us. But it's the word Orthodox is an insulting term.
Interesting. I didn't know. So let's get back to our story. Menashe ben Israel had an amazing prediction regarding American Jews.
Okay, so he has so he begins like this. There's a famous verse. The Navi Isaiah says, the prophet Isaiah says, Yitaka b'shofar gadol, the great shofar will blow. Ubo ha'ovdim be'eretz Ashur, and those who are lost in Assyria will come. V'hanidachim be'eretz Mitzrayim, those who are outcast in Egypt, they will return back to Israel. So first he's bothered with what the Jews are only lost in two places, in Assyria and Egypt. I mean, who's in these places today? So he says, no, Jews are lost in the Far East, and Jews are lost in America. And when Mashiach comes, the Jews of Asia, they'll gather in Assyria. The Jews of America, they'll come to Egypt. And from Assyria and Egypt, they'll make their way to the land of Israel. That's how he sees the end of days. That there'll be sort of, the Jews in Asia will come close to Israel in the east. The Jews of America will come close to Israel in the west, and then they'll enter. But then he says, of all the various countries that will be redeemed in the end of days, he cites a verse in Isaiah, Parak Samach Pasuk Tes, chapter 60, verse 9. says, Kili iyim yikavu, the islands will gather to me. Va'aniyos Tarshish barishaina, and the boats of Tarshish at first. Lahavi vanayich meirachik, to bring their children from a distance. Kaspa muzahava mitam, their silver and gold with them. So the $1 million question is, where's Tarshish? You know, we read about Tarshish and Yonah, and incredibly, Menashe ben Israel interprets Tarshish as America, and he says, Tarshish barishaina, that the first nation to be redeemed when Mashiach comes will be America.
Wow, that's amazing, right? And now they'll be redeemed with their money.
And the verse says explicitly they're bringing their gold and silver with them. So that means they're going to liquidate their bank accounts, take their cryptocurrency, bring their bitcoins, whatever they have, their mutual funds. So, you know, on the one hand, it's sort of comforting, because we think, okay, so we'll continue on our life here in New York, and then when Mashiach comes, we're going to get the buzz first, we're going to get the memo first, and we'll liquidate our accounts, we'll sell our land, and we'll go to Israel. So people said that, you know, I was suggesting that we should sort of continue on and ride the wave over here until we get the memo Mashiach is here. The first thing you have to know is that as great of a man as Menashe ben Israel was, he doesn't have any more of an inside scoop of what's going to happen when Mashiach comes more than any other sage in Israel. In fact, there is no chacham who ever lived who knew the exact details of how this would play out. The Rambam writes explicitly that even the prophets themselves were not given an explicit tradition how things are going to play out when Mashiach comes. And Rambam says we don't know how they're going to play out until they happen. So I would not, if anyone, you know, no betting man, you can't bank on this interpretation of Menashe ben Israel. You know, based on the precedent of history, usually when a Golos ends, they don't knock on our doors and say, you know, we love you so much. You Jews, you're so adorable. So we're going to give you a few weeks to get your stuff together, to liquidate your accounts, to get all your belongings. We'll give you presents. Usually, the Gullus doesn't end that way. We're lucky if we escape with the shirt on our back. So, you know, if past precedent has any bearing on the way things will play out, this would not be a wise recommendation to rely on this interpretation. But if you're going to go with Menashe ben Israel, and by the way, if things don't end this way, I don't think anybody's going to be listening to anyone who says, well, why is it ending this way? Don't you know Menashe ben Israel? You know, I don't think that's going to be of anyone's, it's going to help anybody. By the way, in the Septuagint, the word Tarshish is not interpreted as America. It's interpreted as a country in Africa. So
wouldn't it be closer to Israel? I mean, it would make more sense. Tarshish should be closer to Israel in that general region.
Yeah, so there's a famous city, Carthaga, in North Africa, which many interpret that's what Tarshish is. But this is the opinion of Menashe ben Israel. So if anybody wants to invest in the stock based on that, you know, that's everyone's own personal decision.
But there are different thoughts as to what's going to happen in Messianic age. There's even one thought which may fit in a little bit with what Menashe ben Israel says, that at the end of the days, Yerushalayim will encompass all of Israel, and Israel will encompass the rest of the world. I'm sure you've heard of that too. In which case, you can say if you don't go to Israel, you live in America, you'll still be in Israel at the end of the days if you look at that interpretation.
Right. You know, there is such a notion. We say Adam Esek, right? There's an idea that Israel will go all the way to Damascus. We say every Friday night, you know, Yaminu small to Freitzi, that Israel will expand to the right and to the left. But, you know, this is really the Parsha to think about it. You know, this is Parsha Shalach, and we read about the Meraglim, and we read about how the Jewish people, they didn't want to go in originally, and they cried. And because they cried, we're still in Gullus today. But in terms of, you know, halachically, are Jews in America, are they required today to say, you know, time to go? So it's well known that Moshe Feinstein wrote a halachic responsa about a Jew's obligation to go to Israel. And Rav Moshe Feinstein said that it's not obligatory. However, if one lives there, they fulfill a mitzvah. And he says because it's not obligatory, there are halachic hurdles involved in going there. And he therefore said he did not encourage Jews of America to go to Israel. That was the halachic ruling of Rav Moshe Feinstein. You know, but you could say that was 20 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago when it was difficult to live in the land. Today, it's much easier. Today, people could make a living there. Today, people have education for their kids. You know, it's interesting. As we come to this time of the year, and we know the summer is coming and the 3 weeks are coming, and the whole Golos of the Jewish people is because of the sin of the spies that we read about in this week's Parsha, and their sin was that they cried over the land of Israel. We read in Eicha, we say, Bachai Sifka Balayla, she cries bitterly at night, Vidimasa alachaya, her tear is on her cheek. Her tear is on her cheek. So that's interpreted as follows. One of the most important commentaries penned on Eicha is something called Palgei Mayim from the author of Nesivos HaMishpat, where he says, you know, the spies sinned 3,000 years ago. So why are we still accountable for the sin? Didn't we do enough repentance since then? And he says, no, their sin was they cried, they didn't want to go to the land of Israel. That tear is still on our cheek. We're still crying. As much as they didn't want to go, we also don't want to go. We're guilty of the exact same infraction. Because, look, we in America, do we really even think about going? That's the question. You know, if we were to ask the sages today, if we were to ask Haiskim today, if we were to ask Jewish Talmid Chachamim today, you know, should we go to Eretz Yisrael? There might be legitimate reasons why we're not required to. You know, I remember Rabbi Victor Miller would say it's a mitzvah to live in Israel. It's also a mitzvah to make a living. And, you know.
So is consideration that Rabbi Victor Miller or Moshe Feinstein of Jews not being obligated to go to Israel based on financial concerns they would be able to make a living there?
Yeah, so Rav Moshe's concern was based on the fact that it's not easy to fulfill the mitzvahs of living in the land, Shemitah, Truma, Ma'aser. And because of that, he said you're not obligated to put yourself in that situation. You know, but today that might have changed. You know, maybe in the 50s it wasn't it wasn't easy to keep Shemitah. Today the land is developed. Today, many would say that reason maybe is obsolete.
I want to pick up on that point. Our guest, Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein, he's the head of the Machon Magid Harakia. He also has a shul in the Five Towns area. He's a prolific writer. He's leading a tour to Spain in the summertime. And we continue our conversation. We take some more of your phone calls, 212-769-1925. Are you using this as a justification for not making Aliyah? What do you think about the changing circumstances? We Jews are not as safe, maybe, as we were in the 1950s in America. 212-769-1925. Email is also a wonderful way to have some of your questions answered. zev@talklinenetwork.com, zev@talklinenetwork.com. Coming up a little while, we'll speak to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert, about should Jewish leaders be able to criticize Israel when they're outside the country, among the topics we'll discuss with the former Prime Minister of Israel. We're going to be right back.
If you're on Medicaid, the Essential Plan, or Child Health Plus, these programs will no longer renew automatically. Here's how to stay covered. Start by updating your contact information on your health insurance account. Then look for your renewal notice and respond by your renewal deadline. For expert help with renewing your health insurance or more information, visit nyc.gov/health/health coverage.
This is Idanis Rodriguez, Commissioner of the New York City Department of Transportation. Mayor Eric Adams and I want to remind you that things happen fast on the street. When you're driving, your speed can feel slow, but if you hit someone, it's terrifyingly fast. Drivers, watch out for pedestrians and cyclists and slow your turns to less than 5 miles per hour. Remember, speeding ruins lives. Slow down.
One overdose can take a life, but one spray of naloxone, one friend who is there, one person who knows help is available, could save it. Fentanyl is making the drug supply more dangerous, and more New Yorkers are dying of overdose than ever before. What you know can save a life. Help keep your community safe by learning about overdose risk and supporting access to life-saving services. Visit nyc.gov/alcohol and drugs to learn more.
Eating mostly plant foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans is good for your health. I use beans instead of meat in my grandmother's jerk-style recipe. And when I'm at work, I get a tofu vegetable stir-fry.
I like to get a whole wheat veggie hummus wrap for lunch.
Fresh, frozen, canned, or dried, eat a whole lot more plant foods when you can. For free recipes, resources, and food assistance, call 311 or visit nyc.gov/nutrition.
Did you know that New York City families speak over 180 languages? Good news for parents. All public schools in the city provide translation services and interpreters for meetings. You can request translation for report cards, special education documents like IEPs, and interpretation for your meetings with teachers and staff. For more information, visit schools.nyc.gov/hello or call 311.
I'm always in need of a peaceful start to the day. As the sun is rising, my Anderson windows warm the room as I rejuvenate and find my zen. The natural light brings me energy. I'm a self-expressionist. See more at andersonselfexpressionist.com. Love the life you see.
Available at Greater Windows and Doors at 1302 60th Street in Borough Park. Call them at 718-972-2626. Greater Windows has been serving the community for over 30 years. Commercial and residential accounts welcome. Online at greaterwindows.com.
Hey, this is Alan Dershowitz. One of the most important Jewish institutions in the world today is Talkline with Zev Brenner. He is so smart and he is so innovative and he has so many interesting guests. I don't know what Yiddishkeit, I don't know what New York, I don't know what the world would do without Zev. So Zev, Yasher Koach, may you go from strength to strength and keep informing us and educating us and keep fighting for Jewish values.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
And we're back. We're looking at the end of the days through the eyes of Menashe ben Israel, but others as well. Our guest is Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein. He's a prolific writer. He's a historian. His center is called Machon Magid Harakia. I think you're having a campaign, right, for Machon Harakia?
Yeah, this coming weekend we're having a campaign. Yes. And if anybody wants to participate, it's charity.com/MMH. It's an amazing ability that Hashem gave us these days where you could have your shul, a modest setting, and the shiurim that you give, whatever topic it may be, really has international dissemination. So whether through your radio program, but there's so many venues today, with TorahAnytime.com, podcast, Shas Illuminated, Torah Zoom. Now there's a venue that has Shiurim just for South American Jews that speak Spanish. But since we speak out from the sages of Sepharad, of Sephardic origin, so the Shiurim are on this venue called Torah Zoom. So if anybody wants to help us continue to disseminate the Torah on this scale, charity.com/MMH.
That charity is spelled with a D.
Yeah.
Right. People may think it's with a T. It's CHARIDY. So getting back to the end of days, and I'm sure you must be getting questions. People are always want information about it. It's a very popular topic, even though it's interesting. The Torah itself doesn't really talk about the end, what happens in the Messianic times. But people are curious. So what do you tell people that say, what's going to happen? What's life going to be like at the end of the days? In fact, you have predictions of people saying this is the end of days. In fact, I asked the Rosh Yeshiva Teret Kohanim if it's Chalta de Gula, if it will be the beginning of the redemptive process. And he screamed at me, he goes, no, we're in the middle, Be'emsa. We're in the middle. Obviously, people have different, I think from Rav Kanayevsky, there was a prediction that we're at the end. I'm sure you hear every year, you hear people saying, it's finally here. So how do you explain it to congregants and people ask you this question?
Look, again, who's greater than the Rambam, who says that we don't have an absolute clear tradition how things will play out, and we don't have a way to explain it decisively until it plays out. Even when the redemption from Egypt, there are all kinds of dates were given: 210 years, 400 years, 430 years, and nobody knew how it would play out. So the descendants of Ephraim, they thought the 430 were up, and they ran out. They ran away 30 years old over. They ran out 30 years too soon, and they didn't have a good ending. And then when it finally happened, then we figured it out. 210 was actual time in Egypt. 400 was from the birth of Isaac, and 430 from the covenant of the parts. But we didn't know how to reconcile it until it happened. So the end of days, where we don't even know what the dates we're dealing with, we have no idea how this will play out until it happens. So for anybody to say decisively, we're in the beginning, we're in the middle, we're in the end, it's all speculative. It cannot be more than that by definition. And what's important is what David HaMelech says: Al tivtechu v'nadivim. You can't trust in any people, because the principle of Mashiach is it's not a person. It's not a person. You can't put your faith in a human being. Doesn't matter how great they are. B'ven adam she'en lo teshua. You can't trust in a man that cannot even save himself. Ashrei shekel Yaakov Ezrai. The point of Mashiach is that one has to put their complete trust in the Almighty only. We have a principle: Ein lanu melech goyel ela ata. We only have one king. We only have one redeemer. That is God. And until we're redeemed, we put our faith in Him.
Well, hold on, but we have Mashiach ben Yosef. We have two Mashiach. Mashiach ben Yosef. We have Mashiach ben David. We believe the Messiah is going to come. It's going to be a man who's going
to be a man, but we can't put our faith in any man, because we already know that very clearly from our history. There have been more than 20 false messiahs in our history, and every single one of them ended in a debacle for the Jewish people. So our faith is in God, that God will send us the right agent. But our faith is not in the agent. It's not in any rabbi. It's not in any leader. It's only in the Almighty.
So define for us, how should we perceive Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David?
These are just words that the Gemara says. The Gemara does not give too much information about it. It's a Gemara in Sukkah. There is a Mashiach ben David and a Mashiach ben Yosef. The way the Vilna Gaon explains it is there are two main exiles. There's the exile in Edom, Rome, called America. There's the exile of Yishmael. And Mashiach ben Yosef will redeem us from Edom, and Mashiach ben David will redeem us from Yishmael, which is
the Arab lands.
Yeah, which it's frightening to think about, but the way the Vilna Gaon teaches is that the final exile will not be Edom, it will be Yishmael. That Yishmael will defeat Edom, and we will be redeemed from the redemption from.
Just in English, to parlay what you're saying, it's going to be the West against the Islamic world, basically speaking.
Yeah. I mean, the Gemara speaks about that openly. The Gemara in Yuma brings the dispute: who will be the last two nations standing? And the Gemara says it will be Edom, Rome, and it will be Paras, Persia, which
is Iran.
Which could be interpreted in different ways. Maral actually interprets it as Yishmael, the Arabs. And there are various opinions who will defeat who. It seems like the majority opinion is that Yishmael will defeat Edom, which is pretty startling, because we look, there are many different traditions and many different streams of how things will play out. But again, a person should have firmly in their mind that we don't know definitively.
No, but here's the interesting thing. If you look at what Edom represents, and for many years, we were taught that Edom represents the Catholic Church, which was all powerful. Mm-hmm. Today, the Catholic Church is not as powerful as it was. If you look around, the Islamic movement is much more ascendant than the Catholic Church. So from that perspective, the Yishmaelim won, if you want to look at it from that theological.
Yeah, correct. From that perspective, it could be
a military victory. It could be a religious victory too.
Yeah, point well taken. Absolutely.
Right. And by the way, from what I understand, and I said to some of my Lubavitch friends, is that the Vilna Gaon said that Mashiach ben David, he said it's going to be Solomon, King Shlomo, literally. Well, because there's always a debate: will the Messiah come according to the Jewish tradition from the ranks of the living, or will he come from the ranks of the dead? That's a discussion about who the Mashiach is going to be.
Well, yeah, it seems like the traditional viewpoint is it's from the living.
Now, you said something interesting, because the impression that I have, and I think most of our audience has, that there are two messiahs: the Messiah, the son of Yosef, Messiah, the son of David. Is that they're going to be first to be Mashiach ben Yosef, he's going to get killed, and then you have Mashiach ben David. What you're saying is it's a parallel course, one representing those in the Arab country, one representing those in the Western.
Yeah, that's the truth. What
is that based on?
That's what the Vilna Gaon writes in his commentary to Safra Ditzniusa. Safra Ditzniusa is an early Kabbalistic source. It's sort of what the Mishnah is to the Gemara, the Safra Ditzniusa is to the Zohar. It's like the essential ideas from which the Zohar is based. The Vilna Gaon wrote a commentary to that. And in that commentary, he says there are two forces in this world. There's the force of the shar, the ox, and there's the force of the chamar, the donkey. Edom is called the shar, the ox, and Yishmael is called the chamar. That's why by the Akedah, Avram says, Shavu lachem payim hachamar, stay with the chamar. That's Yishmael. Yishmael is always compared to the chamar. And Esav, Edom, is always called the shar. Then there are two Mashiachs, the Gra says. Mashiach ben Yosef. Yosef is compared to a shar. Bechar shayroi hadarla. He's compared to an ox. So he will redeem us from the exile of the ox, from Edom. On the other hand, David, he's ani v'rochev al chamar. He's the poor man riding on the donkey. He will redeem us from the exile of the donkey. So from Yishmael. The Vilna Gaon writes, the reason you cannot plow with an ox and a donkey together is because we cannot bring the forces of Esav and Yishmael together, because if they would ever unite, they would destroy the whole world. The Vilna Gaon says, you remember when Esav was fuming at Yaakov for taking the blessings? So what does Esav do? The pasuk says he went to marry the daughter of Yishmael. Where does that come in? Because Esav knew the way he could destroy Yaakov is if he unites with the Arab world. My grandfather, blessed memory, he wrote in his memoirs that when he was in Auschwitz, Eichmann invited a special guest to Auschwitz. He invited the Mufti from Jerusalem to Auschwitz. So if you want to know what does the world look like when Esav and Yishmael get together, that's Auschwitz. That's Eichmann and Mufti together. They could destroy the Jewish people. So it's very important that we keep these two powers separate. We keep the shar and the chamar separate.
Rabbi Glatstein is our guest, prolific writer, author, historian. He's also a Kabbalist, as we're hearing right now. His center is called the Machon Magid Harakia, and he has a shul of the similar name in the 5 towns as well. We continue our conversation after the following message. If you want to weigh in, if you want to get some perspective of what's happening at the end of the day, is 212-769-1925, 212-769-1925. Email zev@talklinenetwork.com. He's also leading a tour to Spain and Portugal and Amsterdam coming up in the summer. Let's give out that information one more time before we break.
Okay, so
I'll discount if you mention this program. What's the information again about the tour?
Again, so we're going to Spain, Amsterdam, Portugal, July 10th to the 17th. You could see information about the tour on our site, rabbidg.com. If anybody mentions that they heard about the tour on your program, they'll receive a special discount. You could see on our site, again, rabbidg.com, the details as well as the itinerary. I hope you could join us. People, it's a life-altering experience to go back and trace the footsteps of the origins of the Jewish people, because whether you're Ashkenazic or Sephardic today, we all originated in Spain. That's how we made our way ultimately throughout the world, to Germany, to Poland, to Russia. It's really a lifetime opportunity.
And we're going to be right back. Don't go away. Stay tuned. Coming up in a little while, we'll hear from former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Olmert. We'll hear from Bobby Rechnitz in Los Angeles after these messages.
Let's Get Covered NYC. Health insurance plans that fit your budget are available. Get one-on-one assistance and enroll before the 15th of the month for coverage starting the 1st of the following month. Call 311 and ask for Get Covered NYC or visit nyc.gov/getcoverednyc to be connected to a Get Covered NYC specialist.
One overdose can take a life, but one spray of naloxone, one friend who is there, one person who knows help is available, could save it. Fentanyl is making the drug supply more dangerous, and more New Yorkers are dying of overdose than ever before. What you know and save a life. Help keep your community safe by learning about overdose risk and supporting access to life-saving services. Visit nyc.gov/alcohol and drugs to learn more.
If you're on Medicaid, the Essential Plan, or Child Health Plus, these programs will no longer renew automatically. Here's how to stay covered. Start by updating your contact information on your health insurance account. Then look for your renewal notice and respond by your renewal deadline. For expert help with renewing your health insurance or more information, visit nyc.gov/health/health.
Did you know that New York City families speak over 180 languages? Good news for parents. All public schools in the city provide translation services and interpreters for meetings. You can request translation for report cards, special education documents like IEPs, and interpretation for your meetings with teachers and staff. For more information, visit schools.nyc.gov/hello or call 311.
I'm always in need of a peaceful start to the day. As the sun is rising, my Anderson windows warm the room as I rejuvenate and find my zen. The natural light brings me energy. I'm a self-expressionist. See more at andersonselfexpressionist.com. Love the life you see.
Available at Greater Windows and Doors at 1302 60th Street in Borough Park. Call them at 718-972-2626. Greater Windows has been serving the community for over 30 years. Commercial and residential accounts welcome. Online at greaterwindows.com.
Tobacco companies don't want you to hear this ad. Nope, they don't want you to know that every New Yorker can get free help from an amazing quit coach to help you start quitting and cheer you on. And they definitely don't want you to know that you can get free and safe nicotine medications like patches and lozenges that can help you reduce your urge to smoke. They don't want you to know because medications and a quit coach can double your chance of success. Call 1-866-NY-QUITS or visit nysmokefree.com today. Go ahead, you can do it.
Please welcome the 110th mayor of the great city of New York, Mayor Eric Adams.
One of my favorite radio shows. Always good speaking with you, Zev. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We're the people of the book. So where's yours? Have you ever wanted to write and publish your own book? Are you concerned that your family, friends, and colleagues will never know how you did all the great things in your life? I'm New York Times best-selling author Michael Levin, and books are my babies. My company, Jewish Leaders Books, writes and publishes books by Jewish leaders, people who lead in their companies, their communities, their synagogues, their philanthropies, and their families. We don't just write the book for you. We can publish your book on Amazon and provide Simon & Schuster distribution into Barnes & Nobles and even airport bookstores. We're working with Zev Brenner and Talkline to bring our unique service to Zev's audience. Let your stories come to life with Jewish Leaders Books. Reach out to Zev today at 212-769-1925, extension 100, or email him at zevbrenner@gmail.com, and we'll see you on the bestseller list.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program, Mom. Zev Brenner. Our guest is Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein. He's a prolific writer, author. He has a shul in the 5 towns. He has the Machon Magen Harakir Torah Center, and he's also leading a tour to Spain, Portugal, and to Amsterdam. Here's an email question to you, Rabbi Glatstein. Sylvia writes, what do the Gedolei Hador, the leaders of our generation in America, say about the right time to make Aliyah? And if the rabbi feels we should make Aliyah, why is he here?
Okay. Well, it's nice to get personal questions on Saturday night. Okay, but that's an important question. Let's come back to that. Because the Eicha tells us that the tear of the Meraglim, it's still on our cheek, which means that if we're still in the land of, if we're not in Israel, at the very least, every sensitive, thoughtful Jew needs to ask themselves, why am I not in Israel? That's the first step. You know, if a person doesn't have enough honesty to ask themselves, what am I doing in the diaspora? That's straight out the sin of the spies. So we have to at least ask ourselves the question. And we have to ask our leaders the question. Now, there might be legitimate reasons. Like I mentioned, many Gedolim feel that, okay, living in Israel is a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to make a living. More important than living in Israel.
Up over here, since when does a mitzvah predicated on the fact that if you make a living? I know that we have an expression from Menashe Yisrael, the Torah has pity on Jewish money, and we do things to make it easier for people. But since when is a big mitzvah like Aliyah contingent on the fact that we're going to make a living? The people went to Israel over the course of time. The Vilna Gaon himself tried to go to Israel, but he was stopped. It was tough. And today it's much easier. Even the 1950 was easier than it was in the 1800s to go to live in Israel.
Okay, good point. This is contingent on the fact that living in Israel is not obligatory, but rather it's what we call mitzvah kiyumis. It's a mitzvah that if you live there, you fulfill a mitzvah, but not that you're obligated to go there and live there. That was the opinion of Moshe Feinstein, that it's not an obligation to pick yourself up and go live there. It's that if you do live there, you fulfill a mitzvah. Now, but it's still a legitimate question because, you know, look, making a living is a mitzvah, and if you can't make a living, there's no way to live there. In order to live there, you have to be able to live. But that requires a lot of honesty, because can a person really not make a living there? You know, it depends what you do for a living. Somebody who has a medical practice in the United States of America, can they just pick up and open up a similar practice in the land of Israel? Maybe some could, maybe some can't. It depends what your occupation is. Another important thing, as important as it is to live in Israel, more important is the study of Torah. So if a person has a Rebbe or a location, a shul or a yeshiva where they're learning, whether they're in full-time learning or part-time learning, a person's study of Torah would take precedence over living in the land of Israel. Additionally, educating one's children, and this is probably the most important factor, because, you know, to pick up little kids who don't speak Hebrew and are not familiar with Israeli culture, and just to put them in a school, whatever a person's affiliation is, whether they're affiliated with the Haredi world or the Dati Leumi world, whatever denomination, whatever a person is affiliated with, it's not a very easy transition. So these are all factors that have to be weighed. The first step is one has to ask themselves the question, why am I not there? There may be legitimate answers, and if they're not, then that's really where we need to be. Why am I not there? I don't know if I'm going to release the details of that, to answer that question in front of Zev Brenner's millions of listeners. You know, I don't know if I could reveal that publicly. But again, all of those factors that I mentioned are all factors in, you know, thank God we have young kids at home. So, but it is a question that I always ask myself. And hopefully one day we'll have the merit that
Well, let me ask you this question, because aren't there halachas, Jewish legal rulings, that if, let's say, a man wants to divorce his wife and one of them wants to live in Israel, one wants to not live in Israel. There are certain halachic ramifications where the spouse wants to live in Israel will have precedence over the one who wants to live outside of Israel.
Absolutely. You know,
Today, we're not talking about in times of the Gemara, of the Talmud, we're talking about today.
Right. Technically speaking, if one spouse says, I'm going, the other one has to come along. But look, there are many halachos where husband and wife obligate themselves to in the ksuba. They also the husband obligates himself to support his wife. So if the wife says, I want to go to Israel, the husband says, great, my job here is in America. So he's likewise obligated to support his wife. And if his source of support is in America, then, that would also be a halachic factor.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's a compliment. Now, you also mentioned Rabbi Avigdor Miller. Rabbi Avigdor Miller had a different position for Moshe Feinstein regarding making Aliyah too.
Look, I heard him say the words "making a living is also a mitzvah," and if a person would have to know for certain he would be able to support his family in the land of Israel.
So, and the remaining time we have left, I wanted to get back to the end of the days.
Yes.
And the way we should be looking at it, and give us some more perspective, because I believe the Rambam in my mind does talk about the fact that at the end of the days, when the Messiah comes, what life will be like will be similar to what it is today. There are differences of opinions, what transpire. Perhaps you can share with our audience some of the different rabbinical perspectives, what happens after the Messiah comes.
Look, the Gemara describes two possible ways that the end of days play out. The Gemara describes the supernatural, that will be a time of miracles, it'll be a miraculous redemption, and then the Gemara brings the opinion of Shmuel that really there won't be a major difference between the Messianic era and our time, other than the Jewish people will not be persecuted, and we'll be free to dedicate ourselves to study Torah and to come close to Hashem. And that's how the Rambam paskins. The Rambam paskins that if you're expecting, flying carpets, and you're expecting thunder and lightning and, lights and some kind of supernatural epic period, the Rambam does not side with that approach. Rambam paskins like Shmuel, that ein bein Mashiach v'olam hazeh ela shibud malchiyos. And the Rambam says the Nevi'im never desired the coming of the Messiah other than to have the availability to be free to study the Torah. So here's what we have to do. If what the coming of Mashiach means that we're going to be able to dedicate ourselves to the study of Torah, then we better be prepared now to enjoy studying Torah. Because if we don't have the tools, and we don't have the background, and we don't have the desire to study Torah, then the Messianic era is not going to do us any good. So the best way to prepare for the Messianic era is that we have to educate ourselves, to have the wherewithal, to study Torah, which means, and the best way for a person to enter the world of Torah study is to find aspects of Torah and areas of Torah that interest the person personally. So some people like learning halacha. They should prepare themselves and try to involve themselves in the study of halacha. Those who like to learn Navi or Ksuvim should learn that. Everyone should find an area of Torah that interests them as a Pesach, as an entrance way to the world of Torah, so that when Mashiach comes and now we have the availability to dedicate ourselves, we won't have to be bogged down by earning a living or other things that take up our time, and we'll have more availability to study. We have to make sure we're prepared for that gift, and that we consider it a gift. So
you said according to the opinion of Shmuel that there won't be any difference between the world to come and today's existence, so we'll still have to make a living, right? But you won't have the hurry, you won't have the evil inclination.
Yeah, it'll take the edge off of it.
Right, but they're still gonna have. People are gonna still have jobs. At least that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Do you get many questions dealing with what will happen in Mashiach times, Messianic age, or the end of days? Because I know it's a very popular topic.
Yeah, absolutely. People are always people are very curious about it. People have a lot of interest in it, but no honest rabbi could give a definitive answer of how it's going to play out. So we're all eagerly anticipating. And I know my grandfather, when he was in Dachau, when he was in Auschwitz, he believed be'amuna shalema that Mashiach would come every day. His dying words were, he's waiting for the Mashiach. And we await with complete faith, be'amuna shalema, v'afal pisha yismamea, even though it has delayed. We await it. It's coming every single day.
Right. Well, let's say the Chafetz Chaim had a good suit with him wherever he traveled, right? Because he never knew when Mashiach would come. It can come at any moment in time. Even though what's fascinating, by the way, you mentioned the Vilna Gaon, is he believed, and I believe the Baal Shem Tov, if I'm not mistaken, I have to check my sources, they both believe around the same year that Mashiach was supposed to come. And they both try to make it to Israel at some point. The Vilna Gaon tried, didn't make it. And according to what I read for one of the scholarly works, is one of the reasons why there was antagonism between the Vilna Gaon and the Baal Shem Tov had to do with after that period of time when that year passed and nothing happened. I think the Vilna Gaon still looked at Israel and the Baal Shem Tov changed perspective. And that may have been the cause of the dispute between the Hasidim and the Misnagdim at that period of time.
Mm-hmm. Look, many of the all-time greats made attempts to make it to Eretz Yisrael, whether like the Vilna Gaon, the Baal Shem Tov, Chafetz Chaim, and some of them had the merit, and many of them did not have the merit. But they certainly all thought about it, considered it, and made their best possible attempt. So Hashem should help us all make it there. Kaimamios, erect. Many people want to be buried there. Hashem should give us the zchus to make it there in our lifetime.
Okay, so here's another question coming in. One of I'm laughing because there's some interesting questions that are coming in. Does Rabbi Glatstein accept Lubavitcher Rebbe Shlita as Mashiach?
Rabbi Glatstein, we'll move on to the next question.
But obviously, there is a big talk about Mashiach. Listen, I think Chabad has put Mashiach on the map as far as because there's a lot of focus on Mashiach, perhaps more than other groups, as far as Mashiach. Now, yes, some say the Rebbe is or was Mashiach, but there is a big emphasis. And I think more people are interested in Mashiach today because of Chabad and their emphasis on studying Mashiach.
Yeah, well, one thing, like we mentioned before, the one thing we have to learn from our past history is not to put our faith in any human being. And usually those who get caught up in trusting that a certain individual is Mashiach, it has not ever ended well for the Jewish people. So again, like I mentioned, we put our faith in God that he'll send us the Redeemer at the time that arises before him, and until that happens, the traditional viewpoint is that the Mashiach will be a Melech, that from the living. That's what the Rambam says. Yeah.
You say be a king. So who would fit the category of king in today's day and age?
Again, we're obviously not there yet.
Right, obviously, but there really is a shortage of kings in the world. In fact, I just met the son of the Shah, who I guess he was a king of Persia, king of Iran, I should say, but no longer in power. You see, even in England, they're talking about taking away more powers from the royalty, from the kings. I think that we're seeing what does a king mean from a Jewish perspective? Does it mean an actual king? Is someone who's a leader? How do we perceive kings in today's day and age as far as Mashiach is concerned?
It's a good question. There are probably very few people who have the halachic status of a king. It have to be someone who has the ability to take someone's life. Someone who has that capacity. There are not so many people who could do that. There's a question whether the president of the United States, who maybe could pardon someone, would be considered a melech. But again,
We make a blessing when we sing a president, that like the bracha, the blessing you
Yeah,
make.
most authorities would say yeah, because they do have the power of life and death, because they could pardon someone.
And they can order the CIA to kill somebody too, which has happened as well.
Yeah.
So would the Prime Minister of Israel also fall in that category?
I don't believe so. Because I don't think they have the power to take life and death. I think we would make a bracha on a president of the United States, Prime Minister of Israel.
But he can order the Mossad to kill people. That he can. So he does have that authority. That's why, from a logic perspective, it's just occurring to me now that maybe he should also be considered.
I would have to consult the Nesvarim before I give an answer on that. Yeah.
Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein, I want to thank you for joining us. And I know you're going to be leading a tour to Spain, Portugal, and so let's give out the information one last time.
Okay, so thank you. If anybody wants to join us, we're going to be visiting the origins of the Chachmei Sfarad of Spanish Jewry. We're going to Spain, Amsterdam, Portugal between July 10th and the 17th. You could see any information on our site, rabbidg.com. And if anyone mentions that they heard about the trip on Zev's broadcast, they get a special discount for the trip. So hope you can join us.
$200
off per person, yes.
And again, give that information. I know that you're also the head of the Machon Maggid Harakia Torah Center. You're having a campaign. People want to participate in that. Let's give that information as well.
Yeah, so we're having a campaign, and Zev, if it's okay, I think this is one of the best investments in the Jewish world today, because from our humble base medrash, literally the Shiurim reach millions, they get millions of hits a year, whether on Torah Anytime, on podcast, on OU Torah, on Shas Illuminated, on Torah Zoom, on even on YouTube. So it's really an opportunity to disseminate Torah at an unprecedented level. Please go to charity, charidy.com/MMH, and you could have a share in the dissemination of Torah in an unprecedented way. That's charity.com/MMH, charidy.com/MMH. That stands for Machon Maggid Harakia.
Anyway, I urge people to, if you want to go on a great trip or you want to support the important work, I always enjoy having you, Rabbi Glatstein. When's your next Sefer coming out?
The next Sefer, hopefully Hanukkah time, on English translation of Rabbi Meir Baal Hanes.
Looking forward. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye. All the best. Shabbat.
That's Rabbi Daniel J. Glatstein here on the Talkline Network. When we come back, we'll be speaking to former Prime Minister